Okay, so we've covered the passive and active scanning, and then we talked about vulnerability analysis last week and did some demos of different tools involved in pen testing. And so tonight we covered the scanning, the analysis. So that's basically looking over your vulnerabilities and planning your next steps. And then the next part is penetrating or exploiting the networks, hacking into those systems. And that's what we're going to go into a little more depth on tonight. So we're going to cover exploit network-based vulnerabilities, exploit wireless and RF-based vulnerabilities, exploit specialized systems. Commonalities among network-based vulnerabilities, breaking the rules of normal network behavior, protocol manipulation, suspect client requests, focus on functionality as opposed to security. Security updates can take time and require several stages to be effective. Yep, and just like speaking of those, the iPhone FaceTime vulnerability, how they got that resolved, but then the new update brought other things about. So kind of plays into that. Sniffing, the act of monitoring, intercepting data flowing through a network. And this is really a big one too when you're doing web application pen test, because you intercept the traffic and manipulate it, and then also see if you can eavesdrop or intercept any information that could be helpful in attacking a system. So sniffing is identifying host services, device types, protocols, subnets, IP addresses, etc. Leverage Cleartext protocols to extract credentials, capture files and images, read messages, and steal data. Some sniffers can recreate entire TCP sessions. Encrypted data also provides information, source and destination address and ports, SSID, and initialization vectors for wireless networks. And you'll hear that referred to as IVs for the initialization vectors for wireless networks. VPN handshake information and others. 2 conditions: sniffer interface must be in promiscuous mode and must be on the same network segment as the traffic you want to access. Kind of interesting how some of the networking has evolved, because at one time when people used hubs instead of switches with a network sniffer, you could find a lot more information than you can now on these switch networks. I mean, you could just get on the network, and that's when Cleartext credentials were really dangerous. If you had like Cleartext, HTTP, FTP, or any other kind of authentication going on there, someone could just have a sniffer on the network and intercept that traffic and log in as you. But now with switch networks, that makes it a little more difficult to do. And here is a slide showing a very common free network sniffer, Wireshark. It's actually installed on Kali Linux. It has a sample screen of a network capture. And there's also T-Shark, which is the command line version, which is kind of nice to use for scripting. Eavesdropping, the act of listening secretly to a private conversation or communications. So basically, your typical definition of what eavesdropping is: a speech or telephone conversations, planning a sniffer on the network, secretly placing a camera or microphone in the room, capturing VoIP packets off the network and replaying them, using your phone to record someone else entering a password or PIN across the room, using a Wi-Fi pineapple or a man-in-the-middle device to capture wireless network traffic, using an IMSI catcher man-in-the-middle device to intercept cell phone calls. ARP poisoning, the deliberate mapping of an incorrect MAC address to an incorrect IP address, redirect traffic for malicious purposes. Most common spoofing mechanism on Ethernet and Wi-Fi networks. Facilitate, so yeah, saying that's the most common areas to use those on Ethernet and Wi-Fi networks. Facilitate man-in-the-middle attacks. Packets have IP and MAC addresses. Name resolution ARP needed to look up destination. MAC to IP mapping stored in ARP cache, which changes quite often. And here we got someone doing an ARP request, and you can see the ARP tables with the associated IP addresses. And this is kind of similar to that Net Discover tool that I showed you the other night on Kali Linux, that you can just run and it'll detect what's on that network that you're on, that network segment and pull the IP addresses and the MAC addresses. Ways to poison the ARP cache: send fake ARP replies with your MAC address associated with the target IP address. Send fake ARP replies with your MAC address associated with the default gateway. Send fake ARP replies with the target MAC address associated with your switch port. For man in the middle, poison ARP cache on both victims. Must be on the same network segment. And here's like a capture from Wireshark showing a ARP poisoning attack. TCP session hijacking, the act of taking a user's or client's place after it establishes a TCP connection with a server. Enable connection without providing credentials, conditions, Cleartext protocols used. Attacker needs to observe and correctly predict TCP sequencing numbers. Packets can't be digitally signed. Process, watch the client server TCP sequence numbers, send spoofed TCP fin packets to the client, spoof your IP or MAC to the server pretending to be the client. When the client disconnects, continue communications with the server via the spoofed address. And here's a little network diagram displaying the TCP hijacking. Browser session hijacking, stealing a session credential from a browser and using it for impersonation. All browser requests are considered new unless a session mechanism is in place. Cookies contain a session ID that can be used as an authentication token. Hijacking method, sniffing the cookies, sidejacking. The attacker uses ARP poisoning and Wireshark to sniff the user's Cleartext HTTP session and steal the cookie. Session fixation. Attacker logs into the site, extracts the cookie. The attacker sends a link to the site to the victim. The link has the cookie in it. The victim clicks the link. The site accepts the cookie and associates it with the user. The user logs into the site. The cookie is now associated with the logged in user. The attacker now connects to the site with the same cookie and can enter it without having to authenticate. And let's see, session variable overloading session or overloading session puzzling. The attacker lists the website, visits the website and clicks the forget password link. The attacker enters a known username. The attacker then requests an internal page from the site, such as viewprofile.jsp, and is logged in as that user. Yeah, I found out about someone today was telling me about their, I guess it was DirecTV account. They had to reset their password and they found out from the customer support person, there's a page you can go to and all you have to do is enter your 4-digit PIN and your username, which is your email address, to get your password reset. Can you just imagine getting a list of, you know, probable email addresses and then going through and creating like a dictionary with PIN numbers to try on that and brute forcing login? That's kind of scary to think about. No session logout or expiration. The user leaves the site, walks away from the machine. The attacker finds a way to get session ID from the server. Predictable session token. The attacker analyzes the site use of cookie session IDs and realizes there's simple obfuscation. For example, base64 encoding. And you'll see a lot of this, like your basic authentication for HTTP. It uses a lot of times base64, which is just obfuscating it. It's encoding and it's not actually encrypting it. So a lot of times when I would do pen tests for clients and I run across a situation that I would use like Wireshark and display a capture. This is what it looks like coming across the network. So someone's able to, you know, if they intercept this is the password they get. Continue on the predictable session token after the attacker analyzes the site, uses the session ID, and then realizes theirs. So then the attacker takes a known username, converts it using the same method, and connects as that user. Cross-site scripting. The attacker posts a malicious link with JavaScript in on a vulnerable site. The victim clicks on the link. The JavaScript extracts the cookie and sends in the background to another site the attacker has set up and captures the cookie. The attacker uses the cookie to masquerade as the victim. There's a lot of stuff you can do with that cross-site scripting. You can also use that like on a message board or somewhere where you would say, or a blog where you would save a line of text, and you can put that cross-site scripting link within a page. And actually, some of the dangerous things about cross-site scripting, it doesn't always require that you click on that link. You can do like in JavaScript, you can do like on-page load your malicious file there, your malicious string of code, and someone just opens that page up and it can load it there. And also like on mouse over, you could put like a image in there and someone just mousing over it, then that could trigger the event. So there's and then also too, if you have access to like an admin page, an attacker could inject code in there using cross-site scripting. Man-in-the-middle attacks. An attack whether the attacker inserts himself into a client-server communication session. And this is where the danger of not having secure encryption methods. If you're not using a secure method with your TLS on your website, this is where man-in-the-middle attacks can happen. That's the biggest risks of when your communication strings are not securely encrypted. Man-in-the-middle attacks relay between client and server, enables attacker to capture information or manipulate data. Examples: SSL downgrade or stripping, netcat relay, rogue access points or wireless networks, cellular network towers simulators. This SSL downgrading or stripping, there's a tool called SSL stripper that if you set up like a evil twin attack and then you're able to get them to connect to your device as a Wi-Fi access point, then attackers will use like SSL stripper to remove SSL from that, so you're actually able to see their communications in clear text. Some of the other methods: rogue access points on wireless networks, cellular network tower simulators, require spoofing, ineffective when packets are digitally signed, or if HTTP strict security, transport security is required. And this last one here, that's just where you set within your HTTP server, you set that to enforce that strict transport security. It prevents attackers like other type of attacks. It prevents them going around HTTPS to get into your site, because sometimes that's one of the things an attacker do. If they're trying to attack your site, they'll try to get around it and see if they can get to port 80 or something. That way they can access the site unencrypted. And here just shows a diagram of man-in-the-middle attack. SMB exploits. These are pretty popular because Windows uses SMB. SMB continues to be vulnerable even after several security updates. Common themes: buffer overflows, integer overflows, poor authentication handling, weak authentication encryption algorithms and cryptographic challenges, improper field validation, poor field response parsing, race conditions, client pool corruption, inappropriate access control. Exploits continue to plague SMB servers even now. SMB exploits. SMB managers periodically query devices for status updates. SMB agents can send alerts based on counter thresholds, exploit types, sniff Cleartext SMB communication between managers and agents to obtain community string or information from the devices. Pose SMB manager, provide the community string and elicit information from agents. Exploit implicit trust SMB managers have with the assets they manage. Yeah, whenever you're doing your enumeration and your recon on a system, SMB is a really good target. Say, for instance, like I was mentioning the other night, if port 161 is open for SNMP, there may be other ports that are closed down, but if you run tools like 161, some of the Nmap scripts, you can actually pull some of the information that it gets from SNMP, so you can find other services that are running that system. Maybe those ports are shut down, but if you're able to gain foothold on some of the other open ports, you could possibly get a system disable the firewall or enable certain ports and allow you to do other things. So you can get a lot of information on the system, especially Windows with SNMP. And actually, going through the OSCP training materials, they have like several different labs, and where you're using SNMP to enumerate information. Okay, and here's a sample that they've ran with through Metasploit using one of the auxiliary modules. And so you can see where you got the IP address, the server name, the hardware, the uptime of the server. And you can see the user accounts in there too. So that's some good information. So if you wanted to try to go and hack these accounts, it's funny. If someone on this call sees that first username, they should get a laugh out of it, because we got someone that uses the handle moo, and that's one of the first users on here. Okay, SMTP exploits. SMTP is used to send mail from clients to mail servers and from mail servers to other mail servers. Mix of clear text and encrypted text. No authentication between mail servers. Commands. Verify that the email account exists. And EXPN, expand email list or alias uncovered recipients. So you can actually go through, just like Tinker was showing, how you can transfer. You can actually send the email address from using SNMTP. SNMTP exploits. Common exploits: banner grabbing, clear text sniffing or of authentication, email messages, attachments, spam and phishing relay, email account enumeration, brute forcing account passwords, buffer overflows for arbitrary code exploit, privilege escalation, and denial of service authentication bypass. Yeah, we used to have fun spoofing emails. There used to be this old executable mail spoofing tool called Posty, and you could send command line emails. So we would send emails to people spoofing it from the manager or something.
There's one called B-Mail that you do that.
Oh, really? That's cool.
I invited my boss to a company meeting in Morocco.
Yeah, I was never brave enough to do that with management, but I did it to my coworkers. FTP exploits, process for discovering exploits. Use a port scan to locate, use a port scanner to locate any FTP servers on the target network or host. Most FTP servers listed on TC port 21. Banner grab or otherwise fingerprint the FTP victim to determine the exact product and version number. Search for vulnerabilities or exploits for that version, or possibly write your own zero-day exploit. You write your own zero-day exploit, with the exception of probably one person in this class. You're probably not taking this class, but yeah, there's a lot of good tools out there for like NSE scripts for validating and vulnerabilities with FTP, as well as some of the auxiliary scanners within Metasploit. They can even check for anonymous FTP, some of those auxiliary scanners. Common attacks: sniffing clear text sessions, obtaining credentials and copies of file, buffer overflows, running arbitrary code, or giving service accounts root shell access, denial of service, resource starvation attacks, consuming all of the FTP server's disk space, CPU capacity, RAM, or permitted connections. FTP bounce, using FTP server as a middleman to open connection and send commands to another server. And Nmap has an NSE script that does that. FTP anonymous login with read-write permission, improperly allowing an unauthorized user to upload files. So this is real handy if you find a system that allows FTP access. Maybe you're able to upload a shell and then access it with HTTP on that server. and then launch that shell from a web browser. FTP directory traversal, allow user to leave FTP directory and browse the operating system's directory structure. That gets dangerous because you can find like password files or like the Etsy shadow file with the passwords or Etsy password file with the actual users in Linux. DNS cache poisoning, an attack technique which corrupts DNS data. Corrupt DNS data is entered into a DNS server's lookup, the resolver cache, and fake records are then given to clients and other DNS servers. Most DNS servers query other servers to resolve the host name. One false record can propagate to many DNS servers and clients. Digital signatures and DNSSEC can help, not widely implemented. And here's another explanation. Let's see how DNS cache poisoning works. And another way attacker can attack some of these things, if they wrote some sort of exploit code that you were to download to your system, you could also alter the host file on your machine and put in servers and create mappings to DNS that way if you wanted. So they could download it and then alter that DNS, the host file, and point to other sites. So say if you're trying to go to internal company site, it can redirect you to something externally posing, made to look like to the company site.
Can you do like a phishing?
Yeah, you could do that. Would be perfect with phishing. So you send someone some kind of malicious script that they were to click on it and go in and modify the host file, and then because that's an easy way to do that. I mean, because I remember working for companies before. Say like if they had a server that was just recognizable by IP address, there was no DNS entry, and you wanted to make your own DNS entry so you could find it by name, then you would update the host file. Because actually, some people here probably recognize this, have heard this story, but at one time there wasn't DNS in the internet. There was like just a big host file that you'd have to download to get to other sites on the internet. So you just periodically download these host files, and it just took too much trouble to keep up with. One person had to keep up without all that on the internet, and so they automated that with DNS. I worked with some developers that used to have some pretty cool tools that they would write, because like your UAT and your dev environments, they wanted to keep it close to what production looked like. So if they modify the code, they didn't have to put the paths in the code differently. So they had like a little script that would change the host file. So if it was a UAT environment, then you would just click on this host. You wouldn't be able to get to the production by the regular name because it remaps it. And so they had this little script set up that would map it to the UAT environment to be able to get to those hosts. Name resolution exploits. NetBIOS is used for name resolution of Windows computers before DNS. Let's see, query wins server LM host files and then broadcast message. LMNR replaces NetBIOS. Replace NetBIOS, uses multicasting instead of broadcasting. Supports IPv4 and IPv6. Windows name resolution process. Check if the destination is itself. Check the name is in the DNS resolver cache already. Check if the name of the system of the system root percent is in the system32 drivers Etsy host file. Query the DNS server, send LMNR multicasts to 24.0.0.225, UDP port 5355. This is a pretty common attack vector, the LMNR protocol. There's a tool called Responder, which is a Python script that you can actually intercept broadcast of this. So you can actually capture password hashes using that. And there is a PowerShell version of that tool called Ingve. And that's a really...
There's still people out there using Windows NetBIOS?
This LMNR is different. That was a replacement for NetBIOS. I would bet there's probably, I can't recall an instance, but I would be willing to bet because people putting in backwards compatibility for stuff and them actually going in once they replaced it.
Yeah.
I can't say for sure people are still using NetBIOS or not, but it wouldn't surprise me from what I've seen. Actually, because I did a side pen test over December, and the place I tested, they were running XP still. And so I was able to get into it with the MS-0867, which is normally they're vulnerable to. They probably patched it and wasn't vulnerable to that, but I was able to use like one of the Eternal Blue exploits against it. But yeah, they still had XP in there, which kind of surprised me. I'm sure it was running some kind of application that wouldn't run on newer Windows versions. But it doesn't amaze you some of the older softwares companies have. The thing that it's funny how the browsers always stay behind. Every company I've worked for in the past 14 years has had to run an older browser version to run their internal web applications because they haven't migrated to the newer versions. So you have to run an older version. So then everyone runs like Google Chrome or Firefox for all the regular browsing because, you know, the browser you have to use for the app works okay for the app, but sometimes doesn't work so well for newer websites.
You know, we could target in our system that we use for our schedule and everything. This runs in one browser.
Oh, really?
Internet Explorer.
Version 6.
I haven't read the article, but I don't know if you've seen or not, but there's like even Microsoft had out an alert or update or something that they're telling people to get off Internet Explorer.
Oh, yeah.
To not use it.
Something came across my desk the other day from someone in the company. I was surprised to see that.
Yeah, I saw like on Twitter, found on Twitter or LinkedIn the article to that. Yeah, that's interesting. But I kind of also heard too that they're going to a different browser even outside of Chrome. Outside of Edge, it's going to be more like Google Chrome, and maybe even, I forget, somehow maybe they're taking Chrome and rewriting it or something, but I heard something related to a Chrome type browser that they're coming out with that the Edge is going to be replaced even. And DNS resolution name is, here's responder. That's a really, really nice tool. It was originally written by someone at TrustedSec. Yeah, someone just out here, a Chromium-based browser.
That'd be evolving.
Can't beat them, join them. But yeah, this is a responder right here. It was originally written by a company at, trying to think of originally written by another person, but someone else has taken over maintenance for it and has managed to update it and add functionality to it. It was, yeah, I'm trying to think. It escapes me now. Someone saying here, Edge is switching to Blink rendering engine. Okay. Yeah, TrustWave was the company that originally wrote Responder. They do a lot of PCI work. And network authentication brute forcing. Most network services can be set up to lock after a specific number of failed login attempts. Other services do not, or they provide exceptions for administrative accounts. Automated brute force attacks can compromise these targets. Different protocols used: SMB, Telnet, SMTP, POP3, IMAP, HTTP, FTP. Let's see if they cover on the next page, because you can actually brute force RDP as well. And here's some tools for brute forcing. So Hydra, Medusa, Encrack, NetBIOS, Encrack, and Hydra both do RDP. NetBIOS auditing tool, AET2 brute force, Brutus, Aircrack NG. And here's some password crackers: John the Ripper, Rainbow Crack, Kmable, Loft Crack, Off Crack, Hashcat, and Metasploit modules. Yeah, a lot of these other things. John Ripper works pretty well still, but for some of the more difficult passwords, Hashcat's a good choice. A lot of people used to use rainbow tables and stuff, but now it's just gotten quicker to crack hashes, as opposed to trying to match them and match the hashes in a rainbow table.
But as a pen tester, you wouldn't be using that to change something, right?
To what's no
As
we
a pen tester, you wouldn't be changing something.
no
Meaning cracking a password.
no we would try to crack a password, but yeah.
Question. Some of the Metasploit modules, when you show options,
Mhm.
it's like the username and the password.
Yeah.
I don't have the domain login, but I just did what you said and I got a password for one of those other services. Would that be satisfactory? Make your exploit work?
Yeah, if you have it could be, well, if it's a domain you're trying to get into, you would need possibly, if you're trying to,
Just trying to get a interpreter shell in there.
yeah, if you're trying to get an interpreter shell, it requires a password, then yeah.
What if you had an FTP user and password? It wasn't a domain password, but it's some username and password that's valid for some service on that box.
Sometimes you can reuse that for other things, because sometimes like SSH passwords are the same. I've seen a lot of times where, someone has an account, they want to set it where it's consistent with the rest to make it easy to remember the passwords.
Mhm.
I've used that like in some different labs, like the OSCP labs. There was cases where I found an FTP password and it worked on SSH or something else. So I want to get back to your question, make sure. So
Yeah, I'm still confused. Why would a white hat hacker try to change something?
you wouldn't try to change it. You just try to crack the password, get the password so you can use it.
I see. Okay.
Yeah, we don't want to change passwords because we don't want them to come in and can't get in the next day. We'll try to crack it and use their password, but we won't change it.
Why? I mean, if you know you can, then what's the point of even trying?
If you can crack the password,
Yeah, I guess maybe I'm going down the wrong path here. But
well, if we crack a password, then it can be used to get into other systems.
okay, so what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, if you can crack a password, then you're able to get into the system. So, and sometimes if you crack multiple passwords, then some people have different levels of access. So
Another tool to do another tool.
yeah, it's just making a foothold, because all these are simple little steps. Say like if you got access to a system and it was just a regular user, a low level user, say if they had the web server set properly, you run IIS. If it's on Windows or Apache on a Linux system, say like you're able to hack that application or that web server, and they got it set up properly where they're using a lower level user account to run that service, and you're able to hack that, then that may be, you may not be able to get anywhere with it. Then if you're able to get on there and maybe download some password hashes, maybe you can crack those, and then you're able to escalate privileges and get to a higher level. So that's the thing about hacking and pen testing. You're always trying to find the next step, whatever you can use to get to another area. You may get admin to that particular server, but then maybe there's not the information you need. Then you do a lateral movement where you're trying to get to somewhere else. And if you have these passwords you can reuse, you can get, across the different systems. So yeah, it's just another step in the puzzle, getting to the prize. And you kind of see this once you start playing around labs. You learn one little attack and you just learn to put all this stuff together. So you learn how to brute force the password, and then you learn how to upload like a malicious file or something and exploit that. So all these little things you put together, and sometimes the different scenario, different pieces work. So as you learn these different little tools, you learn to put them together. And pass the hash, this is a good option right here. So if you're not able to crack that hash, you can use tools to actually pass that password hash. Hashes come from hash dumps, RAM, Windows registry, credential files, Metasploit post modules are particularly helpful for like Linux, Windows, apps, and other platforms. There's also a really good tool out there for credential and password cracking. You can actually test it across systems. It's a tool called Cracked Map Exec. You can take hashes and see what systems it works on, or even a password. Say if you hack a system and you found this password, you want to know what other systems will this work on. Because you have to be careful physically trying to attack those systems and getting on there trying to crack passwords. So if you have a password you can reuse, then something like crack map exec will test it across those other systems to find out what it's valid on. Because a lot of times system administrators will use the accounts, you know, they have like the domain or the local administrator password a lot of times can be the same across all systems. So with a tool like that, you can test it before you actually start trying to hack into the system. And here's an example of pass the hash with Windows. They show them with Metasploit. They show them interpreter session, and they're using priv extension. So they load priv extension to be able to load the hash dump. So run post. So then post is like post exploitation. So they're dumping a hash. And so you can see down here, like we did on our demo of the night, you can see that the hashes are dumped. And then knowing what the different passwords mean, knowing these numbers, because you can actually rename administrator to something else, and we'll do that to try to get harder for the attackers. And so you see this first account of a number of 100. So if you know it's like a 500 number, then you know it's that it's the administrator account. So you could take something like this and either pass the hash or either use something like hashcat to crack the hashes. Let's see, here's some more pass the hash attack information. When hashes are obtained, use additional tools to manipulate them. Metasploit modules, Hydra, Medusa, Vel, Catapult. And here's showing the PS exec module within Metasploit. There's also separate Metasploit or PS exec executables or tools that can be run outside of Metasploit. A lot of these tools come along, people adapt them to Metasploit, like PS exec existed before Metasploit. So people will write these tools as Metasploit modules, build it in the functionality of Metasploit to make it easier. I mean, there's enough stuff within Metasploit when you're working on an attack that you can stay in Metasploit a lot of times and not have to go outside it. So tools like PS exec being built into it make that useful. And so you can see where they're using this to pass the hash with PS exec. So you see they're setting the user account to administrator and then setting the password. And so they're using the password hash. Might not always work. Windows Defender Credential Guard and registry settings for UAC.
So are they saying all four of those tools may or may not work, or?
Yes, they're saying that passing the hash may not work. So you just list the tools, and they said might not always work. Or actually, these methods right here, because this is the reason why, because Windows Defender Credential Guard is set up properly, or the registry setting for UAC is set. This is some of the instances where it may not work. DOS attacks, as far as a pen tester goes, this is not really something you do because you don't want to take systems down. There are some cases that people want their systems tested to see how they withstand against DOS, but that's very few and far between. I haven't experienced that myself. And also to go back to some of the Metasploit stuff, when you're looking at the modules, be careful, because if it has DOS or DDoS, well, typically DOS, then there's some DOS modules in Metasploit. So you don't want to accidentally, you're picking an exploit against that system, make sure you're not picking a DOS exploit because you don't want to take down the system. And so flooding servers with network traffic, crashing a service, consuming available resources, protocols, OS or service-based, DOS attack types, packet flood, create and send massive amounts of TCP, UDP, ICMP, or random packet to the target. Can include different TCP flag variants. Send flood, create and send massive amounts of traffic to overwhelm a server or service. Can use UDP or crafted packet variants. And you can also use mass scan, which is for port scanning, but you can really crank up the speed of it because I've accidentally DOSed some firewalls with it before. And here are some more DOS attacks. Ping of death, that one's kind of old. Sending ICMP echo requests that are larger than the 65K byte size, causing the target to crash, freeze, or reboot. Can also be performed by sending fragments that resemble that reassemble to oversized packets. ICMP, UDP fragment attacks send target fragments that reassemble to be too large for the network's MTU. TCP fragmentation attack send the target TCP fragments that have overlapping sequence numbers and cannot be reassembled. Windows NT, Windows 95, and Linux versions prior to version 2.1.63 most vulnerable. Smurf attack, sending large number of spoofed ICMP echo requests to intermediate devices that all respond to a single target. Fraggle attack, same as Smurf attack except UDP instead of ICMP. Land attack sends spoofed packet to where source and destination IPs are the same. The target floods itself with packets. And more DOS attacks. SMB malformed request, request to a SMB name pipe causing a blue screen of death on Windows. Slow Lourdes keeps as many fake web connections as possible open as long as possible until the maximum number of allowed connections is reached. Allows one web server to take down another without impacting other ports or services on the target. NTP amplification, sending spoofed NTP queries to a publicly available NTP server to overwhelm a target with UDP traffic. HTTP flood attack, using seemingly legitimate HTTP GET or POST requests to attack a web server. Does not require spoofing or malformed packets, but can consume a high amount of resources with a single request. DNS flood attack, trying to consume all of the CPU of a DNS server with a flood of requests. DNS amplification, like Smurf attack or other amplification attacks. Multiple public DNS servers receive spoofed queries and respond to a target. Yes.
So for the flood attack, don't you do like a huge amount of computer power to do that for yourself? HTTP flood attack.
What was the question again? You need what?
Don't you do like a huge amount of computer power for yourself to make that effective?
I couldn't really honestly answer that, so I wouldn't. Yeah. Yeah, you would think maybe so.
No, but you can use those free, like a JMeter apps where you can loop in, think just one simple HTTP call and send it in a loop multiple times. You can set up the numbers, how many times you want. Yeah, exactly. It's an infinite loop. So it's a JMeter free app.
Cool. But these things, it's good knowledge from a defender to know, but you really won't be using much of that.
If you remember, there was in the news that just did the DOS attack on the CNN website using.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And here just kind of another little pretty slide on a DOS attack. You're seeing a bunch of packets going to a system. Stress testing, the process of determining the ability of a computer network application or device to maintain a specific level of effectiveness under unfavorable conditions. Basically invoking a DOS attack, uses scripts, bots, other tools, often used to determine the level of traffic of the website can handle. When used pen testing, it will also be destructive. Pen testers should get specific authorization. Clients must be aware. So this is kind of like load testing on steroids. Makes you wonder if anyone's ever used any of those, some of those load runners, some of those tools like that to test, test a site to see how it withstands against. I know you tested just on loads to see what, if you need more resources to run your site. It makes you wonder if anyone uses it from a security perspective to see if it withstand DOS attacks. VLAN hopping. VLAN, as for those of you that don't know, I figure most of you will know, it's a virtual logical area network, a logical group of switches or ports that can extend across a number of switches on an Ethernet campus. VLAN hopping, the act of illegally moving from one VLAN to another. VLANs help segregate network resources by department, device types, or security level. Normally need routing capabilities to move from one VLAN to another, bypass tactics, overflowing the MAC table on a vulnerable switch so that it behaves like a hub, repeating frames out of all ports. Configuring the interface of an attacker machine that becomes a trunk port. It will then negotiate a trunk link with the switch, which allows traffic from any VLAN to flow over that link. This also allows the attacker machine to then apply the desired VLAN tag to malicious packets. The switch can then deliver those packets to a restricted VLAN. There's kind of a slide demonstrating what VLAN hopping. Someone just shared a link to JMeter. NAC bypass attacks. Network access control, the collection of protocols, policies, and hardware often that govern access of devices connecting to a network. NAC provides health checks and quarantine systems that do not meet established health criteria, and forces at network points of entry, including switches, WAPs, wireless access points, remote access, and VPN servers and DHCP servers. Bypass tactics, spoofing the MAC and IP address of a device that cannot natively participate in NAC. Instead of using IPv6, using IPv6 instead of IPv4 for on the authorized device. Using a rogue WAP can get an authorized device to connect with an attacker machine. The attacker machine compromises the authorized device, then uses it to relay malicious traffic to the protected network. Anyone here experienced with NACs? Because someone's asking what sort of devices cannot natively participate in NAC. I would almost think maybe some of the handheld devices like phones and tablets, because but a lot of the NACs too are just basically MAC address filtering on some of them. I know some will get more.
On one time for Verizon. And if you didn't meet the criteria, it would dump you in a special VLAN where the only thing you could do is upgrade your device and say you do meet the criteria.
Yeah, because a lot of those is taken on for what the VPNs used to do. Some of the VPNs, when you log into a network for the first time, would send you somewhere to make sure that you had antivirus and all the security patches and stuff before they'd let you on. And it shows the NAC bypass. So a lot of times you can just spoof MAC addresses to get past some of the systems. And a lot of times companies will, because some of the companies I worked at that use NAC, they would get tired of people not being able to log in, so they didn't have to disable it because they had port blocking set up. So anyone come in unauthorized, plug into the system, couldn't connect, but then they had so many problems with it, they ended up disconnecting it. Yeah, that would be. So yeah, Ben said I have some NAC experience. Don't know of any bypass methods based on MAC other than spoofing an already enrolled MAC address. Yeah, that's what I was referring to. You just have to spoof a MAC address that's already on the network. And sometimes you can get information and get MAC addresses from like phones if they have VoIP phones. Guidelines for exploiting network-based vulnerabilities. Conduct active reconnaissance, including scanning and fingerprinting on the target first, then research possible exploits you can use. Use sniffing and eavesdropping to obtain information needed for the exploit. Use ARP poisoning when conducting man-in-the-middle attacks. Use hijacking to take over client sessions. Choose your exploits based on the target services or protocol. Use DNS cache poisoning and other name resolution exploits to redirect targets when ARP poisoning isn't practical. Use network authentication to brute force or crack passwords. Use pass the hash when password cracking isn't practical. Be careful when using DOS or stress testing attacks, as they're likely to make the server or service unavailable. Use VLAN hopping if you need access to a restricted VLAN. Use NAC bypassing techniques and points of entry in the network that are controlled by a network policy or NAC server. Okay, commonalities among wireless and RF-based vulnerabilities. All wireless devices data must be transmitted over the air. Transmissions not protected from physical assembly. Anyone or anything in range or direction can intercept signals. No need to disrupt physical infrastructure. Some wireless technology is omnidirectional. No need to be facing a specific direction. At greater risk from co-located attacker / pen tester. Remain stealthy by not physically connecting. Wireless technologies have their own unique vulnerabilities. Can't exploit them in wired scenarios. Wireless access point attacks. WAP entry points into a network and transmits data over the air. Yeah, this is your wireless access point. Worthwhile target to test. Vulnerability depends on encryption scheme. WEP uses RC4 stream cipher with 24-bit IV. IV is small and can be cracked with minimal effort. Web cracking, capture traffic and dump packets to a file. IV repeats after a few thousand instances. Repeated IV can be used to crack a password. Can use aircrack ng to inject packets to speed up generation process. Example, spoof MAC of client and inject ARP packets. Most Wi-Fi networks use WPA, WPA2 to mitigate these security issues. More difficult to crack. And wireless attack tools, aircrack NG Suite, Kismet, Wi-Fi. You know, these are all very popular and used a lot. Some of these, when you get into Wi-Fi, it actually contains several tools. And it'll have different attacks. Wi-Fi is kind of nice because you find your target and it'll go through and look and see what kind of protocol it's using, if it's using WPA or WEP, and it'll go through and try different attacks on that. So it just kind of alternates them, whereas the other tools, you'd have to manually go from one tool to another one. The aircrack NG Suite is used a lot because AeroDump is one of those tools, and aircrack NG. Wi-Fi Pumpkin was brought up in class earlier, and Ali had found a link to it. And basically, that Wi-Fi Pumpkin is a way to automate the evil twin attacks. So some of these people come out and take tools and basically a lot of times they're just scripts, not really in-depth tools themselves, but they'll either use different tools or make it easier to configure tools for those attacks. So the Wi-Fi Pumpkin just makes it easier to do your evil twin attacks. And then the Wi-Fi Pineapple is a device that you can get from Hack5, that it scripts a lot of these different type of wireless attacks and makes it easier to perform those on a little small lightweight device. Replay attacks, a process of repeating legitimate transmissions in a malicious context, also called repeating attack. Example, user sends authentication data to system. Attacker eavesdrops on communication. Attacker uses authentication and info on later transmission. Attacker impersonates a victim. Used in web cracking, attacker generates many ARP requests, uses client spoofed MAC address, obtains repeated IV. Fragmentation attacks, an attack that obtains the PRGA of the network packets used in web. PRGA can be used to craft encrypted packets to inject into access point. Injected packets can speed up web cracking process, extract part of a key material from a packet, send ARP requests to AP with this material. AP responds with more key material. Repeat process until you have 1,500 bytes of the PRGA. Craft a packet with the PRGA to inject into the AP. And here shows some sample syntax with the different tools. The AirPlay NG. This is part of the AirCrack NG suite. This is showing the AirPlay NG fragmentation. And then, so you see the syntax for that. Select packet to use in fragmentation. Tools repeat process of sending fragmented packet and then receive key material. Packet Forge NG, packet crafting. So this shows how to use Packet Forge NG to craft the packet. Crafts ARP packet using PRGA you received. And then AirPlay injection. So AirPlay NG is using this attack, send packets over and over, obtains large amount of IVs. In jamming, attack which radio waves are disrupt Wi-Fi signals, uses Wi-Fi radio, and is susceptible to being jammed. Devices broadcast noisy signals on the same frequency. Signals override the signals a receiver is attempting to pick up. Jamming can trigger DOS by disrupting flow of communications. Physical jamming devices are legal in many jurisdictions. Example of the US. Deauthentication can be used in jamming, not quite jamming, but still the term is used, not clients off network. You can actually get little deauth devices. Someone makes like a little device that's pretty small that will actually deauth, cause people to disconnect from the wireless network. Wi-Fi jammer, Python script can deauth all WAPs in an area, can also target specific WAPs or clients, depends on the strength of the wireless interface. Yeah, the person that makes that deauth device also makes one that's like a watch that fits on your wrist, that you can deauth people with.
Not for the sale, right?
Yeah.
We don't sell those stuff.
Yeah, you can get those. Yeah.
Jammers? Yeah.
Well, this is the deauth device. That's kind of different, but I would imagine you can buy jammers. You can buy just about anything. The good thing is, it's probably a good thing that there's not more people that know about these devices that could be used for bad. Because if you just think of people that just want to cause malintent, about half of this stuff, you can just imagine people run around with Wi-Fi deauthers and you wouldn't even know it. And you would build people at Starbucks trying to connect to the internet and couldn't get connected.
You could jump the wheel on it, send traffic to your own.
Yeah.
So a single deauth just kicks you back into an authentication mode, right?
Yeah, it just kicks you out. You have to reconnect.
The problem with those is doing it over and over again. Right?
Yeah, they're doing it over and over again, but you can use that like in it. That's useful because a lot of these tools will do deauth attacks, and they're kind of handy when you're doing like an evil twin attack. So you got an evil access point set up, and you're trying to get people to connect to it. So you do a deauth attack, so everyone disconnects temporarily. And since you're here closer to them, your signal is probably gonna be stronger than the AP that's in the ceiling of the Starbucks. Then they're more likely to connect to you. So that's usually where deauths are used. But this guy's got like several devices you can buy. It's just made to do deauth, and he even, like I said, even come out with a watch.
Yeah, I'd like that for cell phones. It's just not legal though.
Yeah.
Could be one app, right?
I'd have it in my car, drive down the road. Keep
Yeah,
the
when people texting, yeah, that's what's so annoying about most of the time you see people driving in the wrong lane or they're weaving. Used to you think they're drunk. Now it's like you automatically think someone's on their phone. And it's not just texting. You get on there, someone's on their application or whatever, checking their email, probably watching videos. Who knows? Someone was saying that someone at DEF CON someone DOSed the DEF CON Open CTF last year with a bunch of roll your own deauth devices. Could be one of those devices that was for sale. Okay. And deauthentication attacks made possible by Deauth Management Frame and 802.11. Client announces intentions to terminate connection with WAP. You can spoof the victim's MAC address and send Deauth Frame to terminate client connection. Useful more than just simple DOS, supports evil twin, replay attack, cracking, etc. Used by businesses like hotels to knock customers off personal hotspots. Customers forced to pay for Wi-Fi services. A replay engine is used to knock off clients off of WAP. It shows that how that's done with AirPlay. And specify -C for MAC of the client and target. Hardware tools like Wi-Fi Pineapple can enable deauth as well. Wireless sniffing and eavesdropping. You can use sniffers like Wireshark to obtain signals that traverse the air, interface will by default receive transmissions bound for it. Put interface in a promiscuous mode to capture all available transmissions. Sniffing can enable eavesdropping on communications, more viable in open Wi-Fi. Encryption largely mitigates this. Some info is sent in clear text despite encryption modes such as MAC addresses. You can use MAC address and spoofing attacks. And WPA2 networks use deauthentication to capture four-way handshake. Client must perform handshake when reconnecting. You can capture PSK exchange and handshake. Then you can try cracking the PSK. Arrow dump NG to sniff for handshake. It shows how you can use arrow dump to sniff with handshake. Evil twin attack. Rogue access points attempts to deceive users and believing it's a legitimate access point. Spoofing organization's official Wi-Fi network. Form of social engineering, often facilitated through deauthentication. Attacker knocks client off real network. Client connects to a rogue AP. Can launch all manner of attacks against victim. Example, set up a captive portal with login form to harvest credentials. Effective because it's not always easy to determine the correct network. Real and fake IDs have same SSID. Can use encryption protocol. Fake can be placed close to victim so it shows up a strong signal. Evil twin is also open, so not require password. And that's one of the things too when people have their device set to auto connect. So if someone sets up an evil twin, they don't have to have the password. You set up the evil twin without the password and they just connect to it. So so if you're going out somewhere using the Starbucks Wi-Fi, you want to make sure you have that auto connect disabled. Although if someone does like a deauth or something, you could connect to it, but then you're less likely going out somewhere just connecting, because if you notice on your phone sometimes if you got like AT&T that you're out somewhere, you automatically connect to AT&T hotspots. So you can see how prevalent that is. And if someone wants to set up a evil twin, it's real easy to set up an AT&T access point, because a lot of people will connect to that and they'll think it's okay. Karma attack. Some client devices send out probe requests for other known Wi-Fi networks, doesn't wait passively for AP to send beacon frame. Attackers listen for requests and respond with their rogue AP. Client doesn't need to be real close, to be close to real AP. Attacker doesn't need to broadcast spoofed SSID. And it's telling some different evil twin attacks. Downgrade attack, also called SSL strip. Entice victim to connect to evil twin. Victim navigates to HTTPS site. Evil twin acts as a proxy between the secure connection of the site. Site responds, proxy intercept response modifies it to use HTTP, so then you're able to send clear text. Proxy forward responses to user who believe they are in a secure connection. A user's transmission is set to clear text to the proxy. WPS attacks. WPS is an attempt to streamline Wi-Fi setup, device enrollment. Client uses 8-digit PIN to connect. Each PIN is calculated separately. Only 11,000 possible values. Easy to crack within hours. Lockout policy can hamper PIN cracking online. Might take a couple weeks, but still feasible. Lockout may look for MAC addresses. So spoofing would be a bypass, be used to bypass. Brute forcing may trigger DOS on certain WAPs. Pixie dust is offline PIN cracking. Recover PIN in minutes. Several values created to hash 2 hashes. AP uses to authenticate to client. Nonces S-1 and S3 may be weak in some vendors' APs. Nonces plus PIN plus other value equals hashes. If nonces are known, you can add matches to hashes to discover the PIN. Reaver Pixie Dust attack. And it's showing this Reaver tool used for Pixie Dust. Bluejacking, sending of unwanted Bluetooth signals to another Bluetooth enabled device. Require close proximity to device, usually 30 feet, within 30 feet. Involves sending messages, images, videos, etc. Typically used just as annoyance. No overt hijacking over user's device. Reception of unsolicited media can be used as a vector to more malicious attacks, entice user to download malware or give up credentials. Phishing users may be more effective over Bluetooth. Phishing users, okay, yeah, you're using Bluetooth to phish your users. Doesn't require specialized tools. Send message from Bluetooth app to discover devices. Ineffective against non-discoverable devices. Blue snarfing, an attack which an attacker reads information from the victim's Bluetooth device. Goal is to get victims' contacts, calendar, email, text, etc. Bluetooth uses OBEX to facilitate communication between devices. Blue snarfing requires connection to OPP, then connected to the OEBX push target, then submit the OBEX GET request. Request is for common file names defined in LRMC specification. And here shows a different paths for calendar, phone, and for device info. Obtain files with known guessable names. Device must have vulnerable OBX implementation. Ineffective when non-discoverable mode is turned on. Someone was asking how to do bluejacking. I'm seeing if I can find some more information on that. Okay, I found something here. Let's see what this tells us. It says how to bluejack, assuming that you have a Bluetooth phone in your hands. The first thing to do is to make sure that Bluetooth is enabled. You'll need to read the handbook of the particular phone that you have. Somewhere in the menu item, you'll find the item enables Bluetooth, so you just got to make sure Bluetooth's turned on. Your phone will start to search airways for other devices within range. If you're lucky, you'll see a list of them appear, or it will say cannot find. If the later happens, then relocate to another crowd and wait to try again. If you have a list of found devices, then let the fun begin. Bluejacking is, let's see. So yeah, you're sending unwanted message to other users. Various steps involved in mobile. First, press the 5-way joystick down. Okay, this is some kind of old from 2013. So. Okay. Yeah, I'll just have to look into it, see if I can find something a little better on bluejacking and get back with you, Doug. I'll share that information in the class, but find it better because a lot of these articles I'm finding are kind of old. I mean, it's from what they're saying, they're just retrieving information, or well, that's the bluejacking. Yeah, the blue snarfing is getting information. Bluejacking sending text. So I guess you can, because they're showing here using some old phones, so there's definitely no tools on those. You just have to try to connect to someone through Bluetooth and send them messages. But yeah, I'd be interested to know a little more about these Bluetooth attacks. But bluejacking, the sending of unwanted signals to another Bluetooth device requires okay. That was get back to where we're at. Okay. Guidelines for exploiting wireless and RF-based vulnerabilities. Use AirCrackNG to crack keys on Wi-Fi network secured with WEP. Use replay attack to attain repeated 24-bit IV. Speed up WEP cracking with fragmentation attacks using AirPlayNG. Use PRG obtained from fragmentation craft a packet forge NG, send a craft packeted to an AP to easily obtain thousands of IVs. Check laws in your area to make sure radio jamming. Before you use radio jamming, use a tool like AirPlayNG to knock clients off a WAP, send spoof address and deauthentication attacks. Use Evil Twin to entice others to connect a rogue access point. Use karma attacks by tricking clients into sending probe requests and connecting to Evil Twin. Use SSL strip with Evil Twin to downgrade. I was saying SSL stripper, so SSL strip is the correct tool. With Evil Twin to downgrade users' HTTPS session, place your wireless interface in promiscuous mode to receive all available signals. Use AeroDumpNG to sniff four-way wireless handshakes for WPA and WPA2. Key cracking, use online brute forcing to crack a WPS pin. Use pixie dust to conduct offline cracking of vulnerable APs. Use bluejacking to send unsolicited messages to discover Bluetooth devices. Use blue snarfing to read sensitive information from discoverable Bluetooth devices. Okay. Mobile devices, an attractive target to attackers, can hold sensitive data and be used in authentication, etc. Test mobile infrastructure, especially for malware weaknesses. Approach depends on platform. iOS is very restrictive, less opportunity for exploitation. Can only install apps from store by default. Jailbreaking enables installation from third parties, may be able to socially engineer users with jailbroken devices. Android is an easier target, more open than iOS. Changing a single setting can enable installation from third parties. Rooting enables apps to assume high-level privileges, can exfiltrate data, capture session info, etc. Creating a listener on a packet, it is creating a listener and packaging it as an Android installation file. So this shows how to do that with MSF Venom, which is a Metasploit tool. Show how that's done there. Okay, industrial control systems. Any system that enables users to control industrial and critical infrastructure assets over network. Critical infrastructure, water supplies, generators, health services, transportation, etc. ICS is established years ago, little security protection in mind. ICSs incorporated a TCP/IP network, provide more opportunities for exploitation. ICS Exploit is an open source tool for exploitation. Similar syntax to Metasploit, modules can take advantage of PLCs. PLCs directly control industrial systems. Industrial control systems continued. Example, ICS exploit modules controlling start and stop functions on controllers, executing remote commands on controllers, crashing TCP systems running on controllers, trigger DOS through RPC services. SCADA.
Would that be like what Stuxnet was?
I'm not really sure. I don't know if it was in like
submarine,
military stuff, but I don't know.
Nuclear.
Okay, yeah, well, that would have been. Okay. Someone said Stuxnet did target SCADA, so yes, that was. SCADA is a type of ICS that typically monitors critical infrastructure and can use can issue remote commands to those assets. The most prominent types of ICS, increasingly integrated into private network, can interfere with TCP/IP stack, interface with TCP/IP stack, new opportunities for exploitation, sample Metasploit modules. So they have some Metasploit modules here listed for SCADA systems. Do research/recon to identify the make or model of the SCADA components. Metasploit might not have the relevant module, may need to go with other tools. Embedded systems, computer hardware and software systems that have a specific function within a larger system includes everything from home appliances to industrial machinery used in SCADA and other ICS. Hardware is less complex and more consolidated than traditional computers. Embedded OSs maximize resource efficiency. Heavily stripped down versions of standard OSs. Fewer features, rarely have robust security. Examples, embedded Linux distributions and Windows Embedded Compact. Recon tools also apply to embedded OSs. Web interfaces may be open to exploitation. And some of the web interfaces, sometimes they're using older versions of some of these lightweight web servers and not using authentication on those. Real-time operation systems, a special type of embedded OS with a predictable, consistent scheduler. General purpose OS uses scheduler to balance processor time for processes/users. RTOs are ideal for embedded systems, have strict scheduling requirements, usually don't have taxing workloads, often lack strong security features. Example, no depth. Depends on OS. Example, RTOS and vulnerabilities. Code execution against Broadcom Wi-Fi chips running VxWorks. DOS against RPC protocols in VxWorks. Suffer buffer overflow against BlackBerry devices running QNX Neutrino. Buffer overflow against QNX biometrics. Exploits highly specialized and may not apply to your target work environment.
An example of RTOS?
Man, I don't know. Yes, that's new to me. It's interesting some of the stuff they get in depth covering in this book, because I mean, the ICS stuff, I've heard of that, and that's popular in embedded devices, but some of the stuff it's kind of interesting that they get into stuff, because this is something I haven't heard of myself.
Could that be something like the terminals you see in the mall that just run one thing? Have a kiosk
Real-time
and say,
operating system.
this is the company. There's slideshows, all they do.
Let's see what we can find.
I believe those are almost all.
Let's see, real-time operating system.
98.
Okay, there's some examples. What do they do?
Depends on the water, they just say, this is the bank, this is what we do. Get loans through us, stuff like that.
Okay. James in here says RTOSs are for systems where you have milliseconds and nanoseconds, hard real-time requirement, very precise task scheduling.
Like ABS brakes and something hard,
Oh, okay. So no,
like the automatic
Okay.
stop and stuff while you're driving, and somebody can be close to you.
cool. So James says it's that most people pronounce it RTOS. Interesting.
So is it industry specific or,
From what what Aaron was saying, that they use it in cars. So I guess it just depends on whatever application it's being used on. I know there's like, it shows some different versions of the operating system. Free RTOS, that VX works that was mentioned, QNX. So James, do you know any other applications for using RTOS?
The only time I've run into them was automotive and in ICS.
Okay, that's helpful. That makes sense since they covered ICS in this too. Just mentioned ICS.
government defense? Another.
Thanks. Okay. Internet of Things. So this is a pretty wide open thing here, because this can be your IP phones, this could be baby monitors, this could be IP cameras. So different internet connecting things, and these have been really popular. I mean, the thing I was hearing about people testing first was the Internet of Things, and then now you're starting to hear more of the ICS stuff getting really popular. That Robert Lee does some good talks on the ICS stuff, but Internet of Things, object can be electric or not, does not typically include additional computers. Why is it Verizon? They were really getting into the Internet of Things. They had some different devices out there that you could hook up to your car to monitor for, like, for insurance companies to see your usage and how you drive, to track like containers and stuff. But you know, more things and the more common applications you hear of are like the monitors, IP cameras, and those type of things. So a lot of times those aren't very secured, because they had like a bunch of devices out several years ago that were made in China that had hard-coded IP address, hard-coded usernames and passwords into the firmware. So there was no way to go back and change it. What's that?
Fake Cisco router sent out. They
Oh,
were
really?
made in China,
Okay.
fake factories, and hard coded.
Oh,
Couldn't
okay.
get rid of it.
Oh.
The admin using. You had to access it through a specific one port.
Hmm.
And we'd see people scanning the Verizon network for that port.
Okay. So you probably find it on Shodan too around that time. That many people are looking for it. Most vulnerabilities involve leveraging devices' default credentials. Manufacturer may have hard-coded credentials. May not be feasible to remove default credentials. Research target devices default credentials. And there's sites out there for those of you that haven't seen that sites that just contain default credentials. So for whatever application or device, there's sites out there that have the default credentials out there. Other examples, buffer overflow against Snapdragon, automobile and IoT devices, SQL injection against Falemi IP cameras, SynFlood attacks against iSmart alarm home security devices, privilege escalation against Summer Baby Zoom Wi-Fi monitor. Point of sale systems, the place where customers purchase goods or services from a business. POS systems support this practice. POS devices are included in everything from cash registers to mobile phones, devices connected to back-end servers. Servers store and process financial data. Exploiting front-end systems can enable you to access financial data. Mobile devices might be more familiar to you, but are usually locked down. Older specialized devices, terminals, barcode scanners, etc., have little to no security. Compromised devices to read and modify info before it is sent for processing and storage. Also consider targeting back-end POS server. Example, SAP POS failed to authenticate commands. Anyone on the network could upload the config file to the server to gain admin privileges. Attacker could change prices, read sensitive data, trigger DOS, etc. Easier to hook on network and large open stores. Guidelines for exploiting specialized systems. Take inventory of target assets that run systems. Research manufacturer and specific model of specialized systems devices. Consider the inherent security differences in mobile OSs. Identify rooted and jailbroken devices. Generate a malicious APK using MSF Venom to compromise Android devices. Use social engineering to entice Android user to installing malicious APK. Use a tool like ISC Exploit to target specific ISCS vulnerabilities. Search for and use Metasploit modules to target SCADA systems. Use recon tools against embedded OSs and discover open ports in running services. Use web-based exploits against web interfaces on embedded OSs. Research vulnerabilities associated with specific RTOSs. Research default credentials for specific IoT devices. Compromise front-end POS devices to read, modify financial data. Research vulnerabilities in back-end POS servers to compromise financial data. Okay, we got some questions on here. I don't know if, one of the first questions is, what are your go-to network exploits? Do you find that some of them are more effective than others? Let's see. Are there any specialized systems like SCADA or PR systems that you have been included in your own pen tests, or many included in the future? What challenges have these or my systems have present? Yeah, these did. I have to agree with Mason. A lot of these things seem to be, the questions geared more towards someone that's actually been doing this.
We are not looking for the job.
What's that?
We all are looking for jobs.
Yeah. Okay. Well, does anyone have any comments or questions? It's the end of our slides. Oh, also one other thing I wanted to bring up as well, if anyone is interested at Pone School and Denton on the 18th of March, Ben 10 from Trusted Sec is doing a pen testing workshop. And the limit is 50 people because that's the limit of the amount of people that he will teach at one time. And it's limited to 50. Last time I looked, there were like 35 RSVP so far. So if anyone's interested, sign up for that. He usually presents like at DEF CON and like DerbyCon and works for Trusted Sec. So have you guys ever heard of Dave Kennedy? That's Dave Kennedy's company.
Can you send the link?
Yeah.
March or?
It's in March 18th in Denton. I can send out the information for it. Dave Kennedy. He runs Trusted Sec. He's the founder of DerbyCon. A lot of times you've probably seen, just haven't recognized it, but like on CNN, when they usually have some security expert on there, usually Dave Kennedy's their SME that they bring on after any kind of attacks or major security related stuff.
That looks good on a resume.
Yeah. But yeah, he's pretty sharp. He writes the social engineering toolkit is one of their tools. Also the pen tester framework, not the pen tester, escapes me right now. There's a script for installing your pen testing script, scripts for, so like if you got Ubuntu, you can install the tools instead of having to use Kali Linux. He wrote that. He's been around for quite a while, but like I said, he's like usually like one of the SMEs on CNN and some of the other news networks. And he's also referred to as Hacker Dave. Let me see here. Someone said this is actually Ben 10 works for Dave Kennedy, so it's not Dave Kennedy doing this. Is one of Dave Kennedy's guys.
You say Dave Kennedy or Kennedy?
Kennedy. Yeah. Yeah, Dave Kennedy is the guy who owns the company, but it's Ben 10 that's doing the talk. He's one of Dave Kennedy's pen testers. And I actually saw he did a keynote at the Texas Cyber Summit.
On trustedsec.com.
Yep. That's where that, but as far as to sign up for this, I'll have to send out. If you go to meetup.com and look at Pone School, it's listed the 18th of March, but I can send out a link to that. See what the RSVP counts up to. There's 36 RSVP'd. So we just started advertising it yesterday, or actually it didn't go public until today. I gave some of the people in Denton, the regulars there, the chance to sign up first. So since they're regular, so.
So the Trusted Sec, what we do to that name, is that somebody big in the industry or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, some of these you'd have to be familiar with. I mean, don't. And it's actually interesting too, because anyone that watches Mr. Robot, one of the seasons they actually make reference to Dave Kennedy whenever Elliot's trying to social engineer his way into one of the server rooms. They ask him what his name is, and he tells them it's Dave Kennedy. I think Dave Kennedy actually does. He may even been one of the people that, one of the technical advisors for Mr. Robot, if I'm not mistaken.
They're going to share the registration link.
Yes, yeah, I'll send out that link to class. So that's it for the lecture tonight. So you guys are free to work on the labs. And like I said before, the labs could be either done, can be done here or at home.